welcome. This is a really interesting topic. I've been looking forward to this chat. It's all about tech to support SEND. We're joined by Will from CAS, and I can see Wendy there as well in the corner. You'll be doing helping me check the chat and just make sure we're getting any questions that are going to be asked as we go through. But yes, so hello to everybody. I'm Beth at 10 Minute Teach. I'm going to be chatting to Will just to talk a little bit more about supporting SEND in the classroom with technology. Will is from CAS. If you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, Will.
Yeah, hello everyone who's joined us. So my name's Will. I work for Computing at Schools, but for most of the week and for most of my working life, I've been a teacher, primary school teacher, currently working with Year 5, but I've taught in every year group more or less at least once over the last 10 years.
Fabulous. And Wendy, I know we're having a chat next week as well, and you've done lots and lots of work advertising about this amazing event that Computing at Schools have put on over the fortnight.
Yeah, my name's Wendy Piccinini. I'm also one of the CAS outreach managers. I'm a former primary school teacher, so I taught in Surrey for 20 years before I joined Computing at School a couple of years ago. Thank you.
Fabulous. And you still look amazing, Wendy, after teaching for 20 years. Well, without further ado, then, I'm really excited for this. I've got a few questions. I know we've both been asked a couple. So shall I start by asking the questions, Will?
Yes, please do. Yeah, let's start with the questions.
Fab. We've had one question. Is there a way to easily evidence interventions through technology?
Brilliant question. And not the easiest question to answer, but I've had a think about this afternoon since it was sent across. And I think, speaking from personal experience, I think recording interventions, which, you know, most of the time are aimed towards our SEND and disadvantaged pupils, has always been this mystery thing. There's never been this perfect way. But we're here to talk about tech. And so based on tech alone, I would say one of the best things I've seen and experienced, is something we're trying to adopt at my school, is using online portfolios. So we're talking about Tapestry, Seesaw. I nearly said Seesaw. TikTok then, not TikTok. Seesaw, and even things like Class Dojo all offer. And indeed, you could potentially do it through Teams or Classroom, but they all offer something, some function for recording what you're doing. And one of the things that I've learned through research on how to support SEND children in the best possible way is that communication is really important, because at the end of the day, our job is to support the children to overcome the barriers that they have and to achieve as highly as their peers who are not registered SEND. And that's a massive task to undertake for everybody involved. But communication can make a big difference, because if school, home and the child all work in tandem, we can make really good gains. And so things like Seesaw, Class Dojo had that home school communication option. And so just to put it into an example, if I was running an intervention, I would take a photo of some of the work we produced in that session, write a quick blurb about what we'd done. Parents can see that. They could think, right, I'm going to, you know, try and bolster the efforts at home and magpie that activity. You know, it doesn't take a lot of time to do that. But what you've also got then is by the end of the year, a running record of everything that's been done. And their next teacher could look back at that just as easily. And this takes no longer than filling in sort of the box on a piece of paper, which is how we often recorded intervention in the past. It's certainly more dynamic, certainly more interesting. And you can even get the children involved in recording you know, possibly even a video of themselves responding to the outcomes of that session and getting more engaged. They love it. They love this sort of, they're very aware of all the social media stuff. And they almost feel like they're creating content. So brilliant question. And I think, you know, and I'm not going to mention any particular apps for, you know, there are apps for provision mapping. They're very expensive. You know, TS produced some, there are others, but they're very formal and they're very level based and they're very data driven. And I know that's something we have to consider in schools, but actually just seeing the evidence with our own eyes and that communication with home is what those things tend to lack. So that's my best advice for recording interventions.
And things like Seesaw, Class Dojo, they're inclusive as well. I mean, you're not doing something separate, you know, and doing something in addition, which I think sometimes people think SEND is. I mean, obviously it's additional things, but there's no reason why you need to do something on top of it, something that is inclusive, like Seesaw, like Class Dojo. It works perfectly too.
Absolutely. And that integration is so important to whatever we do in the classroom, because as we'll sort of discuss in this session, if it's not something fairly autonomous, it won't get done anyway. It won't be effective. It could end up being a waste of a lot of money, because we're talking about tech here, and tech is not cheap. Although I do have some cheap options. But ultimately, money has to be spent in an attempt to reduce barriers, and that money ideally needs to be worth spending, and can't be a vanity project. So and you're right to say as well that the integrations go beyond SEND stuff. So, you know, schools are already using Seesaw, schools are already using Class Dojo, and even schools that aren't. They're so Dojo, I know personally, is you know, the free version of it's more than good enough. The focus around things beyond just learning, but behavior for learning as well. You know, you could build up your little reward points for contribution, well, anything, you name it. So, and you can tailor it to the individual child as well. So you can make, as you know, one of the things we experienced teachers know with SEND is you cannot measure these children. In most cases, you cannot measure them against the standard baselines. You can't measure them against everyone else in their year group, you know, because they are by and large statistically behind and making different types of progress in many ways, lots of personal progress in many ways that just isn't measured by standard means and by standard tools.
No, 100%. Well, the next one sort of links to that. Is what is your must-have piece of technology for an SEND classroom?
So again, in thinking about this, I think for me, and I'll share a video with this a little bit later, for me, the best tools are the ones that are sort of open to as many children in your room as possible. So as you said, there is definitely a link here. So we're not trying to make it a separate case with these children and treat them far differently to anyone else. We want to sort of, because after all, they're in mainstream school with us. They're capable of learning beyond needing like such additional needs that they've gone to a specialist school. And that's so good for so many children with special educational needs, because the mainstream setting does a world of wonders for things that other specialist schools may not always be able to provide. And so for me, ideally it needs to be something that everyone can benefit from. And so my sort of number one go-to tool is Immersive Reader, which is a Microsoft product, very exclusively Microsoft at the moment, but they are sharing it out. And I'll share a video of it later for anyone who's never seen it before. But as a teacher, I can use that when I'm showing stuff to the class. But on an individual child level, a child can use that to access information. And so to have it both ways, where I can use it to the benefit of pretty much everyone, but also to the benefit of the child, is really good. And it fosters that autonomy as well, because when they see us use it, they know how to use it too. Because
it's also great at home as well. If you've got the link at home that perhaps the parents' literacy isn't quite up to standard as well, you've also got that option really to help in the home.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The next question: what should teachers consider when choosing the hardware for SEND?
So when it comes to hardware, most of the time it's coming down now to tablets or laptops or Chromebooks. There are other aspects of hardware to consider. For example, with pupils with disabilities, you might need to look at specialist mice or keyboards or even motion controllers. as we've had experience of at my school. But it's really important to look at things from an individual child level. I've been into schools where they've sort of blanket purchased, you know, a set of iPads and just thought, right, this will solve everything. But they didn't consider exactly what the need was, that the individual children need solving. And for all, you know, the iPads are a very expensive but very good tool, provided you've actually considered what it'll be good for, because they have various pitfalls as well. And so it is the hardest part of it, that you do have to consider the individual needs. And just to give a quick case study from my school about this, dyslexia and speech and language is by far the greatest sort of special educational need in the UK, statistically. I had a look earlier just to double check the numbers, and the Dyslexia Foundation tells us that 1 in 10 people in the UK has dyslexia, and many undiagnosed. 15% of pupils have SEN. Of those, about 23% will be speech and language related. But of many of the other categories, which are very high up as well, like moderate learning difficulties, which is just as high, that includes communication as well. And so, coming back to the case study, I have a class this year with quite a few dyslexic children, not all diagnosed, but we know when they show those signs. And so we happen to have, knocking around in our ICT cupboard, some old Android tablets which were bought for teachers a few years ago and had lost their purpose, their original purpose, and were idle. And what we did was we downloaded onto them a speech-to-text app. Unfortunately, the voice assistant on it didn't work, because that's always an option. But this app called Dyslexia Aid is essentially a spell checker. Right. But for dyslexic children, traditional spell checkers are almost completely useless, because you really have to spell the words very closely to get the right recommendation. But for these children, getting this cheap, these things were about 80 quid when they were new, but also unused, dusty devices out the cupboard, dusting them off. They still just about updated. We put these apps on, and now these children have a go-to device where they can just say a word, it's spelled immediately on screen for them, and they write it down, and they're autonomous. And that autonomy is the sort of Sesame Street word of the day for me today, is that the technology we buy and the hardware we buy, coming back to that original question, needs to be age appropriate, but also it needs to serve the function you need it to. Yeah. So for that child, a laptop, unnecessary. Laptops, plenty of other positives, plenty of other benefits. But at this point in time, their writing skills and things are generally fine. So handwriting isn't an issue. So they can keep working in the more traditional methods. But spelling, massive barrier. And this device closed that barrier down very quickly, because all of a sudden they had something where they didn't need to ask their partner anymore. They didn't need to ask the teacher, and they didn't need to worry about getting stuff wrong, because despite how many times you say you can get it, you may get it wrong, and that's just a part of learning. They get very hung up on those spelling mistakes. So here was a cheap device that could solve that problem for 80 quid. Very simple.
Fab. So when purchasing hardware, think about, what do I need out of this hardware? And again, like you said, the autonomy of the learner. Will this help aid that? Great tip. What about considerations for software?
So it's a similar kind of thing with software, because it depends what you want the software to help resolve in terms of barriers. We've got to begin at the barrier level. So what is it that the child is not able to do sort of efficiently enough themselves, that we are considering technology as a potential solution? Because tech will not solve the problems necessarily, but it can aid in that stuff. And so you've got to start by thinking about that barrier. So in the case of this dyslexic child, the main barrier was spelling. Reading, generally okay, but we also discovered we could put audiobooks on that same device. And so, again, we found that solution. So a tablet worked really well. But then software, often I find with software recommendations, it just goes straight for the phonics app or the spelling app or the maths app, which is not really what we're after, because any child could benefit from those.
Yeah.
We're thinking with the software, will it help the child to overcome the barrier they have? And so in the case of another child I teach who has moderate learning difficulties and finds it very difficult to write, but could tell you the most incredible detailed sentences, stories, has loads of ideas, but the barrier is brain to page. And as much as we've tried various things, that is the barrier.
Which I think a lot of viewers will have in common, you know.
Absolutely. And as a lot of viewers will also recognise, one thing we teachers have as a barrier is a lack of additional adults. And so, again, we're thinking about technology that can take some of the, you know, can help with the autonomy and take some of that time away from us to allow the children to get on, which I'm sure they appreciate too. And so with this child, we got a Chromebook, and we chose Chromebook because we got Google Classrooms as a result of the pandemic. So it made sense to go that way. Again, use the tech you've already got if you can. And it's got text, it's got speech to text. And of course, Siri can do that, and there's apps that can do that and everything. But a Chromebook, a third of the price of an iPad, built-in keyboard for typing, much better at identifying errors, and it's Google Docs is completely free in theory. Google Classroom completely free in theory. So so incredibly low cost for what we wanted it to do.
Great. So in terms of the benefits that technology brings, that was the question. It's quite a vague question, but what benefits would technology bring to the classroom?
Well, this is what teachers need to consider, and indeed inclusion coordinators, special needs coordinators, is, will technology close the gap? Will technology provide autonomy? Will it help the children to help themselves in many ways? You know, I'm thinking more with a Key Stage 2 mind when I say this, because I'm aware that Key Stage 1 children, there does tend to be more adults available. There does tend to be a bit more help in the room. And obviously the style of device, you know, will change depending on the child's age. But the benefit of technology is ultimately, there's several things actually, and again, autonomy being one of them. The answer to this, I'm actually going to base off of some research that Bechter did. And they said that sort of the best benefits of technology to support SEN is that it unlocks potentially some hidden potential in children who have previously struggled just with communication, because you're opening up different ways to communicate. You know, if a child has real barriers to writing, and we think about how many lessons rely on writing, if we find another way for them to communicate, that can really work. And that might be through creating a presentation instead of writing a document, or it may be that they record a video instead of writing something down, which then enables students to demonstrate achievements in ways that just aren't really possible with traditional methods. It's very difficult, even as a teacher. It's still really difficult to get my mind into the mind of that child, because we don't exactly know what's going on. But you know, it's very easy to see a child not putting much effort in, or could think they're not putting much effort in, or not getting much out in a lesson, and put it down to perhaps laziness or perhaps something, because so many things go undiagnosed. And it's very hard, because we are professionals, but we don't know everything, to pinpoint what the barriers might be, which talking to children is so important for that. But traditional methods don't work for everyone. You know, just because we could write at school quite well, and because we could join our handwriting by 6, doesn't mean, you know, lots of other people can. And what's also useful with technology is you can tailor in many ways aspects of a fairly sort of whole class lesson to the needs of individuals. For example, if pace, if someone's got moderate learning difficulties and they struggle to keep up with the sort of pace of learning, because my goodness, do we have to hammer a lot in, especially in the English curriculum, then if they've got a device, whether it be iPad, Chromebook, whatever it may be, you share your slides to them. They can work through those activities at their pace. And that works even better when they have an INA, an individual needs assistant, or an adult who can be doing that with them. But for most children, I've found with special educational needs, having that ability to slow down, not have to keep up, because, you know, we're designing our slides a lot now as well to be instantly accessible for remote learning. So our slides are a bit more descriptive than maybe they were in the past. We are aware of that. We are attuning to that. And so giving children a chance there, and pace is just one example of taking their time to complete the lesson as best as they can. And we go over and support when we've got the time, but just giving them the option to not have to keep up with everyone else, because again, at the end of the day, they are very likely to be far behind their peers in communication aspects, in aspects of organization. I'm just looking at my list here because I've noted it all down so I don't forget stuff. You know, children with moderate learning difficulties struggle with logic. So something we explain might to us make perfect sense. You might see a row of children going, okay, yeah, fair enough, but there might be that child who needs longer to process the idea. So if they can see the visuals, they can read the writing, then, and take their time, then, you know, they may end up accessing it far better through technology. And that is not something we can provide very easily without slowing everything down.
And just reiterating basically what you've said about them being able to present their work in any way. I mean, the DCF, the Digital Competency Framework in Wales, is really advocating that for every child, you know, that we should incorporate blended learning as much as possible and really allow children to choose their way of presenting and achieving a piece of work. So, you know, all learners as well as SEND, really.
Absolutely.
Oh, go on, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, my hope for the near future is now that schools are getting more devices in kind of as a result of the pandemic, and we've received devices as a result. I hope that this sort of approach to children being given a bit more choice as to how they present their work will be a more normal part of future lessons.
Yeah, 100%. The last question then, before I let you show us some videos, which needs are best supported by tech?
So, as I said earlier on, there's many SEN categories, and not all of them can necessarily be met or supported through tech. And tech is an option, but it's not the solution. We know that. But because communication difficulties, which is speech and language communication, but also a big part of moderate learning difficulties, which are the two most common, and even the autistic spectrum disorder, we know communication can be a difficulty for children on the autistic spectrum. I think the needs for communication are one of the best things that technology can provide. And so what I'll show in the video, a couple of videos in a moment, is some readily available apps or web software as well that support with communication. And this communication kind of goes two ways. We've got, I think the main two things that underpin a lot of communication on most apps is text to speech and speech to text. So giving children the ability to turn words into writing for them, and also to hear words that are written down as speech. And I've come across a few naysayers in my time who've said, well, no, if they're speech to text, then you're taking away responsibility from a job. But you have but we've got to bear in mind, for many children, this is possibly their only passage to communicate, and
we
you know,
scaffold everything else, you know.
Absolutely. And it's not like they're going to grow up and that's going to disappear. That's always going to be an option to them. You know, we're living at a time where I can one day travel to another country again and speak English into my phone, have my phone explain something because I didn't take the time to learn the language. And so what people should do is really harness the technology, because it is going to be available to these children as they get older, and accommodation should be made for children when they get to GCSE level and exams and stuff. We do have to provide additional things. We can't just put everyone in the same boat. And so communication, as it is by and large the main thing that children with SEND need most support with, I think that's the thing that technology can most help provide. And with the emergence of smarter and more human-like AI, that should become easier and easier, and cheaper as well as time goes on.
Well, I'm conscious of the time, and I know you've got some amazing videos to show us. So that was the last question, but please, everybody, feel free if there are any more questions throughout, as well as showing us some videos. Just have some questions in. Oh, Duckstar said, I use my phone all the time to check spellings by dictating in class as well, modelling that excellent use of technology. Well done, you.
Yeah, that's something I do quite a lot. I was tempted to get a Google Home for the classroom, but there was a bit of a safeguarding potential issue there, so we changed it. Yeah, and it's just my iPhone will do that now.
So yeah, we'll have a little look at the videos, but obviously feel free to carry on asking questions. And even if, I will say this later, even if there's any questions after the event is closed, please, I'm going to share this as part of my story. I'm sure you'll share it, and so we'll keep it in at schools. So just, if you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that, please just ask. But over to you, Will, to see these videos. Okay,
so I'm going to temporarily remove you both. I hope that's okay. And and I did find out how to do this earlier, so I'll just do that now. There we go. And this is going to allow me now to share a couple of videos of some of the things that I use. I've folded them all up, ready to go. Here we go. So I mentioned earlier this speech-to-text spell checker app, and this is it, how it looks. It's very, very simple. Something we do have to consider with tech is that you might be able to hear that under my voice there, which hopefully you can, but it not only spells on the screen, but it also reads out what the child said. You can say whole sentences. You can also change the formatting, so you can make it more accessible to children who need tinted colours and things like that. You could change the font. You could slightly change the language as well. Very clever. It costs about £3 the app. You can put it on any old device, including pretty old, Android or iOS devices, which is fantastic. So that's a really, really accessible, cheap solution that can make a massive difference to children with dyslexia or communication difficulties. So that's one. And we've rolled that out, across the school using old tech, which is great. And when the time comes, we might have to buy a few more cheapy sort of devices to share that. Now, one thing I forgot to mention earlier is also that we don't forget that a lot of technology, all devices, in fact, to be honest, have accessibility features which allow us to make a device clearer and easier to use. If I show here, this is just me running through some of the ease of access things on a Windows 10 computer, and it's something we might need to talk to our technicians about at school, because it's easy to forget that some children can't see stuff on a screen very clearly. They might be in a computing lesson and it might be really straining their eyes, but bless them. The one thing I've really learned about children is they just don't really know when to speak up about stuff like that. For some children, it takes years before they finally mention someone like everything's blurry or the letters jumble around the page. And so just making small changes to the way the computer works for the individuals can make a big difference. You know, there's magnifiers, there's color filters, there's high contrast, and the same these same sort of settings are available on iPads. In fact, iPads have got this wonderful screen tint feature. Which I did film it somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. I noticed people are asking what was the name of that first app. That first app was Dyslexia Aid. There's one, I think there's also one called Spelling Aid by the same people, and they do more or less exactly the same thing. More or less exactly the same thing. And so accessibility settings is a fairly simple thing that we can apply to devices, which can then help children to just see things better. It's amazing how much of a difference that can make. And talking about seeing things better, my final video I'd like to share is something which not everybody is aware of, because it is a Microsoft product. And although Microsoft have promised to share this with other people, and I'm sure they'll be good to their word, but at the moment it's very, very much a Microsoft-based thing. Now, our school has Microsoft for the teachers, but not for the kids. Now, this is called Immersive Reader. You'll find it in Word Online and nestled into other places like Teams Chat even has it. Because, as I was sort of saying with Beth earlier, special needs provision doesn't disappear at a certain age. You know, adults need this stuff too. Now, what Immersive Reader allows you to do is take some text on a Word document and display it in all manner of accessible ways. So what I've done here is I've taken a segment of Matilda. It's my go-to passage. Not only is this fantastic for accessibility, because it makes things clearer to read, sort of themselves, it works wonders on a whiteboard. It's unfortunately it is muted because I haven't paid for screencast device, so I haven't got the sound, but I'll talk you through it. What you're seeing at the moment is me just switching between views, and bear in mind this had to be squashed down for a phone screen, but it's essentially free. You know, to an extent it's free. Yeah, and it has, amongst other things, the ability to change the background, change the font, change the spacing, change the language. And this is an amazing one, just because it's on the screen. You can click on it. There's the translation of words in there. So it's got EAL potential too. You can get it to narrow down to one line at a time, or 3 lines at a time. If you want to, or the whole page. You can split the words into syllables. You know, a book, you can buy books that do stuff like this, but my goodness, they're expensive. You click on a word, and it will show you a picture of what it looks like. Now, we have something called Communicate in Print, which is now called Widget. It's incredibly expensive, but it is incredibly good. And so what Microsoft has done is kind of absorb some of those key features, and we're left with this absolutely wonderful tool, which is the kind of thing I will use in my day-to-day teaching when showing stuff on the whiteboard. It reads the words to you as well. So for children who struggle to read, they can hear it. And I know, especially with dyslexic children, when learning to read, which is a mountain of a task for dyslexic children, beyond changing the background color, being able to hear the words and see the writing at the same time makes a world of difference. It really does. And so this is perfect if you're a Microsoft school, because you should have should have access to it. If you're not a Microsoft school, fear not, it's not all over. It's not game over, because we do have, I'll quickly share it. There is I filmed it somewhere, there it is. There's a Chrome extension that somebody has created. They seem to have entirely ripped Immersive Reader off, and I shall not delve into the legality of it all, but a Chrome extension is perfectly okay for us to use. So if you use Chrome, you can use this on websites. It is limited to websites only, but and unfortunately it doesn't work on Google Docs, because I did try. But if you select a text on a website, again, you can do all the features of Immersive Reader, change the font, change the size, split it up into syllables. You can click on a word, see a translation of it. You can also see a picture of what the word is and have it read to you. And the fact that somebody has gone to the time and effort to do that is incredible. And it reminds us too that we shouldn't just be looking at hardware or software necessarily, but also looking at things like browser extensions where there are tools that children can use. You know, a lot of stuff is becoming very web-based again because the internet's becoming a much more powerful place with internet connections picking up. We're less reliant on software. And we do get an SEN budget, of course, but it goes so far. And so to find tools which do the jobs that software that costs hundreds of pounds does is great. You know, it's an absolutely fantastic thing. Right, I'm going to invite Beth and Wendy back to join me for the last bit there. Do please put any questions in the chat for these last few minutes while we're rounding up. Excellent. See, that works seamlessly. Oh, good. I'm glad. This was a bit of a trial run, wasn't it?
Very impressive. Well done, Will.
Yeah. Well, you know, tech is my thing.
Yeah, you'd look a bit silly if you couldn't do it.
Yeah. Although I must admit, I am sat inches away from the Wi-Fi router at the moment because the most worrying thing is always to just cut out.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Oh, they were brilliant videos. The Immersive Reader, the Chrome extension. I was trying to keep a look of what everyone was saying as well. I think Emma Vidovici has said, I'm autistic and have just finished my PGC thanks to teach like read and write. Amazing. Well done. How inspirational. Just finished a PGC and, you know, can have an understanding now of children in her class. You went over the name of the app, which was Dyslexia Aid.
Yeah, Dyslexia Aid or Spelling Aid. They're both made by the same company. They are identical. I can't work out the difference between them. So just go for the one that was updated most recently, which I think is Spelling Aid.
Yeah. Create Learn Inspire said, I love having a larger mouse pointer. Never lose it now on my Clever Touch. And sent a Chromebook accessibility link there. So yeah, fab.
Nice. And what I'll do is I'll share all the different tools that I've been using over the last few years in a forum on the CAS website. So if you're not a member of Computing at Schools, do sign up. It's free. It's a massive community of wonderful, wonderful people who like to share stuff like this. And you'll find in there once I've written it, which I'll do straight after this, is a forum with names of the apps I've used. I'll share clips of the videos if I can, and just everything we've sort of covered today in a nutshell, for you to look over again and think about the next time you're considering technology to support SEND in the classroom in future.
Fab. I'll write a little post as well on mine just to signpost that, and just really to repeat what you were saying. If you're not a member of Computing at Schools at the moment, I really suggest that you become a member. It is free, like you said. It is full of just knowledge, forums, webinars. Just, I wish I'd known about it before I got on Instagram, because I think it would have helped me a lot, just particularly in my earlier career when I needed a bit of help with tech, you know. So definitely check that out.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond just computing, teaching stuff too.
Yeah.
You know, we had a session earlier today on well-being, mindfulness, you know, anything that supports teachers, you'll find it through Computing at Schools. Yeah.
Well, fabulous. Thank you so much, Will. It's been really informative. And I'm sure, I think you've got another event, haven't you, with homework or...
Yeah, so not as I don't think it's the topic everyone would want to jump into, but I will try and sell it because it should be great fun, and there's going to be plenty of great ideas shared in it too. So if anyone wants to join me next Wednesday, not here on Instagram Live, but rather in a more formal webinar setting, do sign up on the CAS website. So next Wednesday, that's moving homework online, so showing how we can take advantage of all the stuff we've had to learn in the last 14 months and apply it to improving teacher well-being by reducing time and marking through moving homework online, and in many ways, you know, supporting SEND pupils by making things more open and accessible too.
Great. Well, thank you so much again. Really, really informative. Again, as I've mentioned, if there are any comments, please feel free to DM me. I'll pass them on to Will, but I'll try and share this link as well, just direct you to Will's Instagram. Thanks very much.